Hello everyone, my name is Dominik Richter. I'm happy to present to you my public engagement activity about hydrogen fuel cells and their applications through Instagram. The target audience I chose were young professionals and university students that will be professionals soon. I chose this group because I mainly came across confused faces when being asked what I was studying. Most people I met during this year have never heard about hydrogen and fuel cells before. Therefore, I was looking for a way to best reach this audience, which I identified to be Instagram. On my personal account, I currently have 690 followers, which is a good amount of people to reach. To reach those followers, I use the Instagram story function, which lets you upload pictures and videos for 24 hours before they disappear. Great tools of the story function that I use to engage with my target audience were quizzes and polls, which I will show in a little bit. An attribute of my followers is that they mainly from 3 different parts of the world, since I lived in Germany until I was 21 years old, then moved to the US for 4.5 years, and currently I'm finishing up my 1-year master's in the UK. Therefore, I had to take the time difference into account. I wanted all my followers to be awake while I would post. I also decided to do the activity over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday, since I expected people to check Instagram more frequently than during the week. The reason why I split it over 2 days was that one day full of stories would have been too much and I would have lost a lot of people on the way that just didn't want to take the time. Instagram also turned out to be a useful source for collecting data because it counts the people that viewed the story and took part in the polls and quizzes. In the left bottom of every slide, you can see the exact number of people that were looking at the slide. I decided to split the activity in 3 parts to not overwhelm anyone. I wanted to have at least 5 hours in between the parts to give people time to answer one part before the next one appeared. I tried to keep the information per slide short to keep the reading at a minimum. The information had to be served in a manner that an audience with little to no knowledge about the subject would understand as well. I started off with an introduction about my project. At first I planned to upload an introductory video. I recorded it already and sent it to 2 people that work in online marketing to receive feedback. They suggested the video would be too long for people to stay interested, so I decided to write a little introductory text, and big numbers and amounts always have kind of a mind-blowing effect, so I was making sure to incorporate some of those, which can be seen in the middle slide of the next page. For the middle one, I also added different categories like money, pollution, jobs to reach different interest groups. On the left one, you can see the introductory text I wrote, and on the right side, I notified my followers that the next 2 days my story will just be about the activity, and if they were not interested, I recommended them to skip it. During the 3-slide introduction, only 56 people did not return to watch the rest, which came as a surprise to me, but it showed that people at least have a basic interest to hear about it. And as I mentioned before, you can see how many people saw the slide on the left bottom where it says seen by 463 compared to on the right side seen by 415. After this, I began with part 1, and I will go over this part in more detail to display how I delivered the activity and evaluated the data. Due to the extent of the activity paired with the time restriction on this presentation, I'm not able to go into the same detail for parts 2 and 3. I started off with basics about hydrogen to transition into my first evaluation about the types and production methods to test basic knowledge. And if you were wondering before why the numbers didn't add up to the 56 people that I lost, it was meant to be 56 people that I lost after the 3 slides to now. So now it's 407 people that were still there. For evaluation, the quiz function of the story came in handy and is a great tool. With this, you can give up to 4 options out of which the audience can choose from. I asked 4 questions displayed on the slide. Throughout this little quiz section, 38 people stopped looking at the story, and the number of answers I received varied between 80 and 65, which means between 17 and 20% of the people that viewed the story also answered the questions. I noted hereby that the percentage of correct answers would increase from question to question, and the biggest difference was from the first to the second question, but that can be explained through having 4 options compared to 3 afterwards. Only 27.5% answered correctly on the first question, which leads me to the conclusion or assumption that the rest hasn't read an article or seen news about hydrogen and fuel cells, since the differentiation of the types gets mentioned in pretty much all of the basic articles. The following 3 questions were answered correctly with a percentage of 44 to 57%. For those 3 questions, it seems like people were thinking logically, even though they might not have known the answer for sure. 44% of people answered green for the cleanest type, which is the second question, which is an indicator that the name was chosen wisely. For the production of gray hydrogen, almost 50% figured it was steam methane reforming, possibly because it included methane in the name. After this part, I summarized the 3 types to reinforce the learning. This can be seen on the left side. I also wanted to give people the opportunity to reach out to me directly, as you can see on the right side. And at this point, 347 people are still looking at the story, which accounts for a loss of 116 people compared to the beginning. In part 2, I wanted to tell people about fuel cells, since they make it possible that hydrogen we learned about on the first day can be used as a fuel. I was surprised to see that the people count has gone up again, since there were 358 people again that have viewed my story, and I was hopeful for a second that this trend would continue, but I got disappointed on the next slide. As you can see, it dropped to 328. But I figured it were mostly people that forgot that I was only talking about the activity for 2 days and then remembered when they saw this slide, so they stopped looking at it. On the right side, I compared the fuel cell to an engine and battery to make it easier for the audience to understand. On this slide, I explained how fuel cells are differentiated and gave information about the operation temperature to illustrate different applications. The middle slide was posted right after the left one and led me to interfere. Therefore, the number of people watching the slide on the left bottom is to be disregarded, since I took the screenshot after 4 hours to explain why people are giving the wrong answer. I had to do this since I used the poll function, and polls don't show the correct answer. They just show how the majority voted, and oftentimes people think the majority is right. And since the majority was wrong, I had to clarify. On the right side, you can see when I clarified and gave some information about why they were wrong. I also did another quiz which was viewed by 278 people and answered by 44, which is still 16% of the people that actively engaged. I kept part 2 shorter because fuel cells are really not the most interesting part about the topic for the most people, and I didn't want to scare them away for the last part. At this point, it seemed like people that are still looking at the story would not leave in high numbers again and were here to stay. I felt like I had to incorporate some teaser for part 3 because I felt like comparing battery vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles would be the most interesting to people. The last part was mostly about the fuel cell electric vehicle versus battery electric vehicle comparison. At the beginning of part 3, I still had 251 people on board. I gave a little background information about the status quo, the infrastructure issues, and an outlook in the future. As expected, I didn't lose a big amount of viewers from slide to slide. Hydrogen safety is a big public concern that will need further education in the coming years. As shown in this activity, almost half of the people that voted have safety concerns with fuel cell vehicles. I provided some facts on the right side that explain why this is wrong. Next was the fuel cell electric vehicles versus battery electric vehicles comparison. Throughout that part, I would ask poll questions as to which type performs better in different areas and would give information afterwards that explain the right answer. The first area I looked at was range, where I provided a comparison between 2 comparable vehicles with the same size on the right side. Also price, where I explained why battery electric vehicles are cheaper. The next one was efficiency, and I was surprised to see that 91% answered wrong on this one, and only 3 people knew the right answer. So I hope my explanation on the right side helped them to understand what was wrong about it. The last comparison was refueling versus charging, where I also explained on the right side why fuel cell electric vehicles were better. Throughout the polls, between 16 and 90% of viewers actively engaged and answered the questions again. I ended with a little statement that it shouldn't be seen as a competition between the two of them, but that the combination of both could take advantage of the strength of both. Lastly, I explained how my research relates to the topic and gave some insight about my findings. I thank the audience for their attention and feedback and challenged them to inform themselves about hydrogen and fuel cell activity in their community. The aim of this activity was to provide the audience with accurate information to educate them about the topic, and the key take-home message was that hydrogen and hydrogen vehicles are safe, green, convenient, and a serious option for our energy demands in the future. Throughout the whole activity, I was in constant engaging with the audience through direct messages which I offered them to reach out to me, and I was surprised by how many people actually took that offer and reached out, and especially the guy where the black arrow is pointing to. We had a conversation for over an hour, and he was really educating about the subject as well, and he was thanking me for the additional information that I provided. Overall, I was really surprised and happy about the amount of people that took part. It was 25% of all of my followers, which I didn't expect in the beginning. For all my polls and quizzes, I had an active engagement of 15 to 20%, and I was a little scared in the beginning that it would drop down from the first polls and quizzes, that people after failure would be discouraged to take part in the next ones, but it constantly stayed between 15 and 20%, so that was really good. And in total, 175 people stayed until the last slide, which I mentioned already is 25%, so that's really good. To improve, I potentially should have done a third day instead of 2 parts on one day. The numbers were dropping on the one day, and you could tell from day 1 to day 2 I didn't lose as many followers, but within day 2 I lost a bunch of people that were viewing the story. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I certainly enjoyed this little activity.